Hey everybody, welcome back to the History of Video Games. My name is Wes, and I'm here with Ben. How you doing today, Ben?
I'm doing great. How are you, Wes?
I am doing pretty good, and as a eagle-eared, that's not the right phrase, but people who've been listening to this podcast a lot might notice my audio sounds a little bit different. Got a new mic for Christmas, and yes, it is the end of February now, but I'm finally using it and recording with it, so very excited to be using this.
Oh, yeah. And yeah, so just give us like a couple weeks to get me, it'll take me some time to get it, dialed in on the back end, but I think it'll be good. I'm looking forward to
overall, most likely a positive change, but it is a change in audio. So for Ben, who is our researcher, editor, and also star of this show, it makes a little bit of extra work right at the offset for it.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Like music and audio are like two drastically different fields, So
right.
So just because I do a lot of one does not mean I'm good at the other. So I'm sure it'll be fine. I'll figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. But do you want to start us off with what you've been playing for this week or over the past week?
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of more of the same. It's a lot of Pokemon. It's lot of some StarCraft still. I got a new personal best MMR rating in StarCraft, which is cool. And then I lost like 3 games in a row. But
right. But you got that screenshot and send it to all your friends, which is the important part.
Yeah, exactly. So I've been doing a little bit of that. I've been playing through my ROM hack that I made with the Nuzlocke rules. I don't know if I said that. It's been like 2 weeks since we recorded.
We talked about Nuzlocke, but you didn't mention that you started a Nuzlocke playthrough on the recording.
Yeah, I don't know why I wanted to do it, but I, wanted to play through the ROM hack I made, and I was like, well, I think I kind of am interested in doing a Nuzlocke, which just for people who out there are not sure of what that means, it basically means I'm only allowed to catch 1 Pokemon per route, and that also includes, like, by the way, like, I thought maybe I could get away with maybe catching like 1 Pokemon in each like floor of a cave, and I'm like, no, I can't do that. Like that would be too easy. So just 1 Pokemon per cave. And also, if any Pokemon die, you're not allowed to use them anymore. So if your whole team wipes and that was all the Pokemon you had, you're supposed to restart the game, which I have done already. I restarted once, and now I'm on my second time through, and it's going a lot better. But actually, I feel like I'm through kind of some of the hardest parts, because I started out with Charmander, right? And he's like, things that are super effective against him are like Rock, which is the first gym, and Water, which is the second gym.
Right. Yeah.
So it was pretty hard in the beginning, but I think the next couple of gyms I'm going to breeze through. I'm a little bit worried about, I know at the end of, I want to say the SSN boat fight, you have to first your rival again, and Giovanni's like pretty soon after. So those two I'm a little concerned about, but so far with this is my second playthrough now, I lost quite a few number of Pokemon in the second gym, but I still have a Charmeleon. He's still leading the team. I have a Pidgeotto. I have I just caught an Oddish, which I feel pretty good about. So it could be worse, and I'm having a good time. I mean, you definitely have to grind a lot more, but I kind of like the challenge. So yeah, and it's fun to play my own ROM hack, because everything that I kind of want to be there is there. So that's really cool. But what about you, Wes? What have you been up to?
Well, so I have been also, I got a little new thing that I'll talk about at the end of this, but mainly just more XCOM. And as I mentioned to you, but didn't get a chance to mention for the podcast, I was, doing great. I was doing classic difficulty, which is basically like hard in XCOM. And I wasn't doing Iron Man mode, which is the mode where you can't load previous saves. Because I was like, well, I'll give myself a little bit of leeway since I'm not used to this difficulty. Save scummed a couple different times. Campaign was getting a little rough. And then I got to this part where I was like, okay, I can do this big thing, kill one of these chosen characters, and it'll really swing the tide of the meta campaign, and I'll get all these resources, stuff like that. Went in there, kicked their door down, got my ass handed to me, and wiped, and just rage quit and deleted all my saves. Basically.
I mean, that sounds right.
Yeah.
That sounds like how it's supposed to go down.
Yeah. Maybe not that much of a rage quit, but I was pretty upset about it.
Yeah.
And so I started a new campaign, went back to the lower difficulty because I was like, well, I'm learning all these new mechanics and I'm not super great at these games anyway. So I want to make sure I'm actually having a good time with it. But I did switch it back to Iron Man because there's definitely some more. I like that gameplay better for the XCOM game because there's more weight to your decisions, and which is ironic coming from the guy who said he just deleted all his saves after he wiped his squad. But I don't know. I started playing the first XCOM, not the first XCOM reboot like that. So that's kind of where it, in my mind, it's Iron Man is like the way that you should play those XCOM games.
Yeah.
And so far it's going a lot better. I think I've only lost one person so far. It was a guy I really liked, so I was a little upset, but I'm still doing pretty good, working through it slower this time and not binging it like I was last time, which is also probably a good thing. But yeah, it's been good. The amount of mechanics they put in this War of the Chosen DLC is crazy. They just added so much stuff. Like all the new enemy types and just the overarching new mission types and objectives. It's nuts. It's a whole different way to play XCOM 2.
Yeah. I kind of like that too because I don't think I'd really enjoy playing on a harder difficulty with games like that because I feel like with hard difficulty you have to kind of go slow, and that's definitely not me.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'd rather go fast and accept my consequences but still be like kind of okay than have to be forced to like really take my time. Like that doesn't sound that fun. So I'm definitely with you. I kind of would rather do like a lower difficulty but Iron Man it than try something hard.
Yeah.
I don't know, it just doesn't seem like the game for me to go super hard on it.
And I realized that the more I played the harder difficulty, I was like, oh, I can do all these and take like no casualties, but I have to spend like an hour on each mission.
Right.
Which is like a lot of time spent when you have to do tons of missions to get through the campaign.
Yeah.
And so I'm still making mistakes in Iron Man now that I'm on the lower difficulty where it's like, wow, if I'd actually thought about putting my person in full cover instead of half cover, they wouldn't be dead. But yeah, the way I enjoy playing that game, and I can live with the mistake saying like, all right, I'm playing it this way on purpose. I'm playing too fast. That's fine. Whatever. Keep moving with it. Keep having fun.
Yeah. And I think it is a good time if you do it that way, at least for me.
It is. Yeah. Especially when you can miss 97% chances because of course that's how percentage to hit works. Like you can't take it too seriously. You're going to get a little pissed if you're treating those 97s as guaranteed and all that.
Right. Yeah.
But other than that, the new thing I wanted to talk about, which I just played this morning actually for the first time, is League of Legends Teamfight Tactics, I think it's called. It's a game mode within League.
I feel like I might have seen that before. Is there a Dota 2 version?
There is, and I believe the genre is called auto chess or something like
chess?
that.
I don't think it. Oh, it is. It kind of reminded me of like Heroes of Might and Magic or something when I saw like videos, but I don't really know how it's played at all.
Yeah, so I just jumped into it. Two of our friends who play League and play Teamfight Tactics were walking me through it a little bit. It's sort of like a deck building game. You have like an available option of characters. You get money as you progress, and you can pick these different characters to do like different builds because there's synergy with all these different characters. But then you position them on like this little hex-tiled map, and there's like ranged and melee people, and they don't have certain movements per se, like chess. Like they don't move like one block forward and attack. It's just that they have different AI and different pathing. So where you put them kind of determines what the opponent AI will do and what your AI will do. So there is sort of a chess element in that side of it, but it's like you're building this deck almost of all these characters, you're leveling them up, doing stuff like that. But once the gameplay actually starts, you're just like sitting back and watching them wail on each other and hoping you have better team composition and better positioning and stuff. But it's interesting. There's a lot more to it than I thought. I kept seeing YouTube videos on it and just didn't pay attention to it at all and was like, I don't care about this. I don't feel like learning what auto chess is, but it's pretty good. It's at least going to be like a couple days of playing that for me. I'm going to play some after this. It's a good time. And it's free. So, it's
yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, so that's my little anecdote on the auto chess genre. I haven't played too much of it yet, but it's a new thing that's kind of different than anything I've really played before. So excited to play some more of that.
Is there any motivation to play other than just for fun? Like, are you unlocking people or anything when you do it?
That is why I think I'm probably going to end up being bored of it by tomorrow. It's so I like League and the normal League game modes, and I'm all about the collecting skins, and like I don't really feel like spending money on it, but I do get excited if I get like a cool skin and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no crossover between the main League skins and Teamfight Tactics. It's just like skins and like little avatars that you can get for Teamfight Tactics. So I don't know.
I see.
If there was crossover there, like I could grind in Teamfight Tactics to earn some cool skins in the regular League game, I'd definitely be more down for it. But right now, there's not enough reward. It's sort of just the novelty of it that's keeping me interested.
Okay. I mean, it still sounds like a kind of fun thing. I feel like I would like that, and I haven't tried it at all. Or maybe I'll try the Dota one. But
yeah, I think you would. It's got those tactical elements. It's also like pretty quick. I feel like it took me like 15-30 minutes to do like a whole match, depending on the match.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it's right up your alley, and I'm sure each one of it seems like all the MOBAs are doing their own version of it, but each MOBA probably has a slightly different version that has its benefits and drawbacks. Yeah, so I'd be interested to see how the Dota one is.
Yeah, I think Disguised Toast is playing that now.
He is. That's actually the reason I know about it. I feel like he's playing the League one a lot.
He's playing the League one?
Yes, I'm pretty sure.
I had no idea which one he was doing, but I love that guy, so
that's reason enough to try
interested.
It out.
Yeah. All right, should we move into our special topic today, Wes?
Yeah, let's get right into it.
All right. We're going to be talking about the Fairchild Channel F today, which is the very first second generation console. Can you believe it, Wes? We're here.
It's insane. The future is now.
We're past the first generation, but not really, because we'll be talking about first generation like next episode, but we'll be like back. But we're starting to get in there, and that's like very, very nice, because it's going to mean kind of the end of Pong clones a little bit.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, so I thought maybe for today's special topic, we'd talk a little bit about the second generation versus the first generation. What's the differences? What's the classification? Why is this one so important? And yeah, so I'll start it out, and you can add in if you have anything, Wes.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
So I'll just want to get into like sort of the hardware side. That's really what's differentiating this from the first generation consoles. There's a couple like big key points. Number one, all second generation consoles use cartridges, and I know the Magnavox Odyssey used cartridges, and there's been a couple like generation 1 other consoles that have also used cartridges, but it becomes like the norm in second gen, and I think it's really in combination with the second factor, which is that these consoles have a microprocessor inside of them, which is like massive. And it means that not all of the game data is like the cartridges aren't being read the same way that they were in Gen 1. It's not like they're taking components from that. It's more like the cartridges for Gen 2 is like telling the microprocessor like what to do. So
right.
It's kind of like a cartridge with the microprocessor is really what's differentiating this from Gen 1. And because it has a microprocessor, not all of the like work is being done on the cartridge. Like it's being shared with the console itself and the cartridge, which now is weird. They actually call them ROM cartridges because the ROMs are what has the game data, which we know because emulators use ROMs. So it's kind of interesting that kind of what it's called is like being integrated this early. I don't know, but
right. Yeah, well, I think that's a direct play off. I think the ROMs in emulators is a direct play off of cartridges, or read-only memory, right. I think is what it stands for.
Right.
And it's sort of like this new way that they could store games on separate singular devices, or like cartridges in this case, instead of consoles. So I'm guessing that's where the nomenclature comes from when you're talking about emulators and all that.
Right. So you have the microprocessor. That's, I think, probably the most important part. You have the cartridges, which with the cartridges, it also allows a lot more games to be made per console, rather than in Generation 1, it's widely known as like a generation where you only got the games that were on the console itself. You know, there wasn't extra games. The only ones that did that were other cartridge-based machines, like the original Odyssey, which, to be fair, that original Odyssey is like pretty different from the majority of Generation 1 game cartridges, or game consoles. You know, there's always exceptions, but the general principle is that Generation 2 is cartridge forward, it's microprocessor forward. The Fairchild is the first one to have a microprocessor, so that's why it's the second generation console. There's another couple like little things that the second generation is known for. One is that it had enough AI to produce machines that could actually like verse a human. I think we've seen a couple consoles in Generation 1 where they had like robot paddles, but I don't think that they were actually really playing.
Right, so much as just like automatically going to the ball, and some of the ones that we've played are like they don't play by the same rules necessarily. Right.
Yeah, I think we've seen it a little bit in kind of Pong games, but like we're gonna see here, is it gonna be today? Yeah, today we're gonna see the Fairchild. Like you can play tic-tac-toe versus the machine, and I don't think we've seen that on a console before.
No, yeah, it's mainly been computer games that have done that.
Right, and some arcade games, I think maybe. Was tic-tac-toe on the original Odyssey? I'm completely blanking now.
I don't know if it was. I feel like we've seen it on arcade cabinets and computer, definitely, but I don't know if we've seen it on consoles, really.
It had Simon Says. That's not it. No, I don't think the original Odyssey did have tic-tac-toe. No, it didn't. So, yeah, this is the first like console that has AI enough to at least run a game like that. Right. And hopefully better ones, but we'll see.
Well, it's a whole generation. We got some time.
Yeah, we do have some time. So, yeah, this generation features improvements made to AI. That's kind of one of the things it's known for. It's known for better resolution. I don't know if we're going to see that today necessarily, but better resolution. Color graphics, we will see that today. Better audio, which I think we will see today as well. And that's kind of it. When does it get replaced? Generation 3 is like the NES, I want to say. So this is kind of the in-between from like the most basic of consoles that, you know, anybody in their backyard could put together, and, you know, one of the best consoles of all time. So it's the beginning of what we know and love, I'd say. And because of that, I'm really excited for it.
Yeah. It's start of a whole new thing, and it's going to be incremental, but even with the Fairchild Channel F that we're taking a look at today, there's big advances over the Generation 1 stuff.
Yeah.
It always gets a little muddled in the timeline because we talk about a lot of different types of games where we're talking about arcade cabinets, computer games, and consoles. But this is a huge step for consoles.
Yeah. And I think more than anything, when I watch videos of this console, it brings back memories of the Odyssey. Like, it seems fun and colorful, and the games are kind of like out there and a little bit more weird than we're used to. And I don't know, it feels like the Odyssey is next kind of reincarnation, and I really am excited about that.
Yeah. And also just the cartridge advance and having games that are stored and could sort of have different mechanics without taking so much load on the console means that you can experiment with a lot more of that weird stuff instead of just adding holes in the wall to make slightly different Pong variant games like we've seen in the Gen 1 consoles.
Right, or using overlays and then basically be like, here's 3 squares but under an overlay. Right,
exactly.
But
so
yeah,
I just had a couple of things to add on to the end there to give you an idea of the impact this generation had. One console from this generation, one of the most notable ones, the Atari 2600, which we'll be talking about in a later episode, wasn't discontinued and taken off shelves until 1992, which I don't know how well it was selling in the 90s, but the fact that they were like, yeah, we could still probably sell a couple of these through to 1992 is pretty nuts.
Yeah.
It's probably definitely wasn't the best console at that time, I'm sure, but still, it's crazy that it was in production for that long.
Yeah.
Another crazy thing, the Fairchild, which we'll be looking at today, has a pause button. It's just nuts. I mean, it's sort of like a menu or like a mode select button, but it actually pauses gameplay. So that's a crazy jump that this generation has. And even though the Fairchild started this generation, it only ends up selling about 250,000 consoles compared to the 30 million that Atari would sell. Of course, the Fairchild, I think, remains in production for like 4 or 5 years compared to the like 12 or 18 or however many years the Atari 2600 ends up being in production.
Yeah.
But it's crazy. So we're starting off with this one. This console is going to be great, but there's tons of great consoles to come in this generation as well.
Yeah, and by the way, now you mentioned the pause thing. That actually reminded me. I think this is the first console to have like options, because I think you can decide like how long the games are and stuff.
Yeah, you can do timed modes. Depending on the game, there's different modes. Like you can do timed or untimed. How many players do you want to play? And there's actually, it's not really an options screen. It's just a letter with a question mark that shows up on the screen saying like M question mark for what mode you want to play. But still, that's like more than anything we've had before.
Yeah, I think up to this point it's been all like hardware, like actual switches on the machine, you know? But this is kind of like there's something in the game, like an options menu kind of. So
yeah,
it's pretty cool.
Just another example of how the cartridges and cartridge style games frees up so much more space that they can put things into the console themselves that work with all the games. Mm-hmm. To be honest, I'm not sure if that feature itself is on each cartridge or on the console, but either way, more features could be packed into the console because of that. And right. I did want to mention that since it's February and we are in Black History Month right now, one of the main people who helped pioneer the cartridge style for video games is Jerry Lawson, who was one of the few African-American engineers in the video game industry at the time. So really cool. It's kind of crazy that we just managed to do this episode and be recording it right at the time when we're in Black History Month. Mm-hmm. It's awesome. And it's really cool to see how huge of an impact that has on like everything video gaming. Like, I feel like you can't understate how important cartridges are.
Right. I mean, until everything becomes digital, which has only happened, over the past 10 years, like that's like how things happened, you know? So, right. Yeah, it's really, really important. So, Wes, do you want to talk us a little bit about the hardware at all? What we're looking at here for the Fairchild before we get into games?
Yeah, so I can just talk a little bit about what it looks like. It's got that typical wood grain siding, like the fake sticker kind of wood grain, or maybe real on this, but I highly doubt it, that we've seen in a lot of consoles of this time. Other than that, it's sort of square, has a black top, a couple different buttons for some manual inputs that you could navigate through the menus that showed up on the screen, and a big slot in the front where you would put the cartridge in. And one of the most interesting features of this console, the Fairchild Channel F, are the 2 joystick controllers that you have for it. Mm-hmm. They are both innovative and incredibly confusing. They are corded, and so you can actually play it and like sit on the couch and not have to be attached to console like a lot of the early consoles that we saw. But they basically look like somebody described it as a lightsaber, and I think that's a really good way to do it. Sort of just like a handle that you hold upright with a knob on the top that can move in 8 different directions, be rotated left and right, be pulled up and pulled down, or pushed in, which is like 10 or 12 different inputs for a controller for a console. Seeing some people play these games, it seems like that may have been more confusing than helpful in some cases. But still, that's a lot of awesome options for a console to have and for a controller to have, when usually it's just like a volume knob basically on a square for controllers in some of these other consoles that we've seen. Yeah,
it's very unique, and to be fair, they do use like a lot of the inputs. So I don't know like how hard it would be to actually use, because they look like they're pretty hard to use, but I feel like if you got really good at them, it would be pretty entertaining to watch like someone who actually knows what they're doing use one, I think.
Right, yeah, because it's some weird, like, I don't know, so it's some things that they didn't figure out yet. Like, it doesn't really make sense to have to pull the thing out of the joystick to be an input, but yeah, so they're pretty cool. They're interesting. Part of the charm
like,
for this.
Even on the controllers we have today, like the joysticks can be buttons, right? So
they can, yeah, clicks in.
Yeah, you would never pull it out, like you said, but I feel like they had something there, a little bit. So yeah, that's a little bit about the Fairchild. We'll be talking more about them. The manufacturer itself, the Fairchild Semiconductor Corporation, I don't really know much about them. They haven't made like any games up to this point. They were mainly in the computer, semiconductor, making chips and stuff, like doing crazy electronic stuff. And originally, actually, the Fairchild Channel F, it had a Intel 8080 in it, and that was the microprocessor. But they took it out, they put their own in. So they made their own microprocessor, and I don't know if, I want to say the microprocessor was actually geared maybe towards computers, and they put it in this because they made it, in-house for one thing, and they also were trying to sell the chip. But in any case, I think, their background in microprocessors is why they're so early onto the scene. And I'm sure they didn't know what would be the future of the industry and that they would, be kind of in the lead. Right. I don't know if that was on purpose, but yeah, it's very interesting that this whole, one of the biggest consoles that we've ever covered is by a company that's really not made any video games in their history. So I don't know. We'll see what they do with it, though. Maybe they'll continue, maybe they won't. I'm not sure, but I'm rooting for them as it stands. So, although I still, if Magnavox came out with something, I'd be like, okay.
There are cool darlings, right? I mean, they started us off on this journey.
Yeah. So I'm sure we'll see them again. Let's move into the timeline, Wes. We've got some games to talk about.
All right, let's get right into it.
Hello and welcome back from that beautiful musical interlude. As always,
brings a tear to my eye in the best way.
Yep. Before we move into the Fairchild Channel F, which this episode is mostly going to be the games that it launched with, there's a couple short honorable mentions here I wanted to mention. Actually, the first two shared a flyer with Fighter Squadron, which was the last one we did in the last episode, but I didn't realize that. So the first one here is called Missile Command. It's by Bailey. The Fighter Squadron one was also by Bailey. Came out in November of 1976, and only a flyer exists. The flyer I mentioned earlier. It was probably even never released, and I've got no idea how it was played. I thought maybe like another missile game like Seawolf, because it's called Missile Command, but I really have no idea.
And next up, to round out that trio that we kept you waiting with on the last episode to make sure you were coming back for more, is Sebring, also by Bailey. Same flyer, and basically same deal. No idea if it was released, but it looks like it was a clone of Nürburgring or Night Driver. That sort of style game. And next up, to wrap up our honorable mentions before we get right into the Fairchild Channel F, we have Raceway Deluxe by Fuji, which also came out in November in 76, and it looks like it was basically just a speed race clone, but we don't really have much info on it.
Yep. Good old Fuji.
Good old Fuji.
And that's going to move us into the Fairchild, which I wanted to make this episode mainly just about the Fairchild Channel F because it's such a big deal and it has some pretty interesting games. So a little bit of background. The console came out in November of 76. There were 3, they called them video carts, which were like, I think they were single cartridges. So 3 other cartridges that were sold separately. As far as I know, all 3 were available at release. I'm not sure if when you bought the console, you got one, like the first one, with it or not. But I do know that you got a demo cart, first of all, which was basically just told you how to use the controllers, how to use the menu, and I think had like maybe some sort of test to make sure the machine was working correctly on it. And then the console had 2 games, I think, that were embedded within the console itself, tennis and hockey, which I'll be talking about. with all the games, they have color graphics, which is great. They have on-screen scoring, which is great, and they have sound. So it's like the trifecta.
Oh yeah.
Just starting us out here. So yeah, before we get into the video carts, I'm going to talk about the 2 games that came on the console. These ones I know you'll be able to play, assuming you bought the console. Like I said, I don't know if the video carts, if any of them were bundled or not, but these 2 games are tennis and hockey. For tennis, you've got your pretty standard Pong style tennis. And, I didn't feel like we really needed to cover that much. But the other game I decided to take a look at a little bit more in depth and give my rating on, which is hockey. And this is a little bit different because, first of all, it's Odyssey style. So already it's like we got a Pong and an Odyssey style, which I'm a big fan of. More choice.
Yeah,
Makes it a little bit more different from Pong. And there was like a couple other interesting things. So as I started, trying to rate this, playing it, and watching people play it, you've got 2 paddles on either side. You've got a goalie, which actually looks a little bit different from the other paddle. It's kind of like 2 solid lines instead of the normal paddle, which is 1.
Oh, cool.
I don't have no idea how easy it would be to control both paddles independently on the same controller. But there's a way to do it. So I don't know how like fun it would be to use. But you could move the goalie and your paddle independently of one another. And like I said, your paddle is Odyssey style, so it can move horizontally. The goalie cannot. The actual goal is not that big, so the goalie does a fairly good job of covering it, just kind of chilling back there, but you can move it up and down if you want. And then probably the most interesting thing about the whole game is that your paddle can rotate. So normally it's kind of straight up and down, right? But you can kind of go, I want to say like, what would that be? Like 22.5 degrees and then 45 and then 67.5.
Oh, like they don't in stages. It's not like smooth movement, or
that's correct. Yeah, it's like stages, but there's like 8 different stages or something. Like there's like quite a bit.
Wow.
You can't go fully horizontal, but it's like, I don't know. What would that be, like 89% or something like that? It's basically horizontal, but it looks more like a kind of weird Z that's smushed a little bit. But yeah, you can kind of like tilt and turn this paddle a lot. I was really surprised with how many different variations it had on it. And whatever variation you are, depending on which one it is, when the ball hits off the paddle, it'll be redirected differently. So it really increases your chances of aiming by a lot, I think. You can like really do some crazy stuff, like have it pointed upwards so the opponent thinks that when the ball's coming, it'll be shooting upwards, and then immediately you like quick do a rotation, now it's shooting down. Like right. I think there's a whole bunch of cool gameplay things there that I've never really seen before. I'm like, how has this never been done? We've been watching Pong clones for like 4 years,
Yeah, none of them had, they would have like randomly simulated different angles of impact and stuff like that. I know we saw in like 1 or 2 of them, but never being able to change your own angle. That's crazy. Yeah,
I think talented people will just like really dominate in the game. But other than that, like I said before, it had color graphics. It was like, I want to say blue was one person, red was another, and it had like a gray background and maybe like I want to say red or blue outline of the playing field, which actually didn't take up the whole screen. It was kind of weird. Like you were playing inside of a square kind of, but it wasn't the edges of the screen. So I don't think it used the full amount of the screen as well as like some other consoles do, but I didn't mind it. You also had score in the bottom, which was displayed all the time, but it was outside the bounds of the playing area, so it never got obstructed. And you also had a timer that you could put there if you wanted. Otherwise, I think it goes up to 19, I want to say. I'm not totally sure, but maybe you could set it. Yeah, a kind of interesting hockey game here. First of all, Odyssey style. I think you could still cross the halfway line with your paddle.
Oh, nice.
Just go to the other person's side, which sounds like pretty trolly, But, it definitely makes it feel different from Pong, right? So I quite enjoyed it, and the different angles of the paddles was pretty cool. So, and also being able to move both of your paddles independently. So it's a pretty interesting hockey one. It's not like groundbreaking though.
Right.
So getting into my ratings, I gave gameplay just 2.5 out of 10. I mean, you're still just looking at hockey upon game that we've seen before. The angles of the paddle makes it unique enough to not be like a 1, but I don't think it's like crazy looking. For graphics, I gave that 2.5 out of 10 as well. I mean, it is true color, which I very much appreciate, but I wouldn't say it's better than the other true color ones that we've seen. So, I just kept it reasonable, I thought.
Right.
For sound, it just uses basic Pong sounds. What do you think, Wes? I was debating a 1.5, but I'm kind of feeling like 1 now. What do you think?
Well, we'll see, but I think for most of mine, I gave 1.5s for sound. In my 2, they used the sounds at least somewhat creatively, but they are just Pong sounds. So I don't know. It can go either way. When you're playing a game like hockey, I might give it a 1.
I think I should give it a 1. So I'm going to give it a 1 for sound. Because it's basically the Pong sounds that we know. I think they were original, but they sound basically identical to the Pong sounds that we know. So
right.
I'm just going to give it a 1. And then for relevance, this one is hard to talk about relevance and like exclude the console with it, So I was just like, you know what, for this one, it's not only just the relevance of this hockey game, but of the entire console itself. I'm giving a relevant score. So that's why this is so high. I'm giving 9 out of 10 because this is like when you bought the Fairchild Channel F, this is what you got. And, the Fairchild Channel F is like one of the most important consoles that we've ever covered, starting off the second generation. And if you look at like what Generation 1 consoles look like in the beginning compared to Generation 2, like it's so different. I mean, even just having color, having some extra gameplay elements, having cartridges and having, I don't know, I mean, it can't be understated like how important this console is. And it is the one that I think inspires the Atari 2600, which will come out next year. So it's not like the Atari 2600 guys are like about to release theirs,
Right, yeah.
I'm sure they had some influence. So, and, despite not selling 30 million, I think still selling 250,000 copies is still quite a lot, especially in a year that's filled with consoles. I mean, I don't know how many total were on my list, but it had to been a couple hundred, I want to say. So, and by a company that had no experience in video games, I mean, it's like so crazy that it made such an impact, and it totally did. So, to me, my relevant score for hockey was kind of like hockey, but really talking about the console itself. So I gave it 9 out of 10. And that gives me a total score, which I didn't add up beforehand.
The suspense is killing me.
I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10, Wes.
All right.
That's not my the way I usually add up my numbers, but the relevance would have put it way too high. So
you're doing the Wesley way, where I just kind of look at it and mathematically it doesn't make any sense, but I'm like, yeah, that's a 2.
Right. A 3 is pretty generous. I mean, it's one of the more interesting hockey games that I've ever experienced, and that's saying a lot because I've experienced quite a lot of hockey games by this point.
Right,
so, and I do think it would be quite a lot of fun. And it feels like, here's the biggest thing: it feels like genuinely different from tennis. And that's like really hard to do.
Right. When every other hockey game on a console has just been tennis with 2 paddles.
Right.
That's like
or like
the
tennis
only
with tennis with like little goals, and that's it,
Yeah.
So this one actually had a unique way of playing and a unique set of mechanics that were different from tennis, which they kept pretty pure, in the Pong style, which I actually think is probably pretty smart by them. So, yeah, those are the 2 that came with the original console. So let's move into the first video cart, which Wes is going to talk about. This was available at release. So, and it features quite a few games.
Yeah, so let's get right into those. We're starting off with one of them that we felt was self-explanatory enough not to go into too in-depth on it. We have tic-tac-toe on the video cart one, which is basically just standard tic-tac-toe. I think it was red and blue with a white background. But still, it's pretty cool that we're seeing that on a console. It's nothing too crazy, but and as far as I know, it was 1-player and 2-player for this as well, but it might have only been 1-player.
And featured versus AI mode for the 1-player, which is cool.
Right, yeah, which usually we're used to seeing that in tons of other games, but not so much in consoles.
Mm-hmm. But the direct influence from Burning the Brain right there.
Right, exactly. They're like, this is how we innovate on games. We make tic-tac-toe in a new type of gaming system. Yep. The next one, which I got to take a more in-depth look at, which was Shooting Gallery. And I did want to get into a little bit just about the cartridges themselves, just briefly what they looked like and all that before I start talking about this game. The boxes for them, you should look up some picture of these video cards. They're real cool. They're all black with like this, not psychedelic, but like multicolored scheme on it and a big number on it saying which video cart it is. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it has some real like cool, original, collectible kind of value to it. And the cartridges themselves were these big yellow pieces of plastic, huge cartridges compared to what we'd be used to for like a N64 or a Sega Genesis or something. And they just housed the ROM, but had this flap on the bottom that was spring-loaded that would expose the end of the ROM so it could plug right into the console. And so it's pretty cool. They found a good way to do this. And they also just had a little sticker slapped on the front that matched the same imaging and number system that they had for the video cartridges. But getting into Shooting Gallery, it's got an interesting color palette. It's a green background with red lines on the top and bottom for a border, and a blue target and paddle, which was sort of a gun, and also a bullet, which was blue, that when you hit your target turned red. The game itself could be set to 4 different game speeds, which change the speed of everything in the game, including the travel speed of your bullet and the travel speed of the target. You could play it in a timed mode, which would be 5, 10, or 20 minutes, which is a little bit extreme for a target shooting game if you wanted to do a 20-minute session of really going at it. But they did have that option. And the game down at the bottom of the screen also, on either side of the timer, had a tracking for the total shots that you've taken and the total hits that you have on the target. So if you combine that with the timed mode, there's a bunch of different ways that you could have used this to compete with friends. You could do your total like hit per shot ratio, or how many hits you can get in a certain time, and tons of cool stuff like that. There also was an untimed mode, which as far as I could tell, it didn't have any end, but the scores did loop after 100 since they could only display 2 digits. So after a certain point, you'd have to restart, or you'd run out of stuff to do once you hit the target 100 times anyway. One of the main gameplay mechanics of this is that each time you hit the target, your paddle is moved to a different position and a different angle. You can't move your paddle around. You can just shoot the ball out of it. And the paddle basically had the same angles that were used in hockey for this, which, after hearing you talk about hockey, makes me a little upset that I can't move the paddle around, considering it could do all those angles and move around.
Yeah.
I was sitting here thinking, man, Shooting Gallery is like revolutionary, all these different angles, but I'm stationary.
Yeah.
So that bums me out a little bit, but either way, it is still pretty cool. It had basically the 45, the 22.5 or whatever it is, and then the straight vertical, and then the same for facing downwards. The targets also moved to different positions on the screen, but the way the target fell was basically top to bottom. It just kind of moved either closer or further away from you, depending on where your paddle moved. So I wanted to get straight into my ratings for this one because the gameplay is pretty simple. Your target's facing different ways. Sometimes it bounces off the top and bottom, but you have to hit the target to progress, and then it moves to a new location. So I thought that getting right into the ratings would help describe a little bit more about it. For the graphics, I ended up giving it a 2.5 out of 10. The color graphics on consoles are great, and I'm glad that they're back. They aren't necessarily super detailed or exciting in this one, but it does have a lot of different colors, where some of them didn't really have all that many colors available. I think they did some really nice things, like having the score and timer at the bottom that were really displayed very clearly. The target itself is kind of plain. It's just like a box with one dot at the bottom. It could either be a tank or a balloon. It's a little hard to tell. And the bullet is just a bouncing square. But the fact that there's a combination of all those different factors with the scoring and the timer is a lot for a console compared to some of the other stuff that we've seen. The paddle itself is just kind of 5 pixels in a line, but it was cool that they had the same 5 different shapes or positions that were in hockey for this. And my one big complaint about the graphics for this, for Shooting Gallery, is that on the fastest speeds, which were like part of the console and a way that you could opt into playing it, the bullet and the target were just kind of like jittering all over the screen, and you couldn't really track where they are. But you could see it well enough that I felt like I could still zero in and hit a target, even if I was playing it on the fastest speed. For sound, here's where I got a little bit generous. I give it a 1.5 out of 10. While I love the console and think it's a huge step for consoles, the sound is just Pong sounds, like we were saying. In Shooting Gallery, there's only like 2 different Pong beeps, one for firing and one that is for both bouncing off walls and hitting the target. I would have liked to see like at least some kind of different noise for hitting the target, but unfortunately nothing in this game. Gameplay, I think for this one is where it really shines. It's a different spin on the Shooting Gallery type game. Like, you're not just a crosshair aiming at things sliding across the screen. I like that because the position is constantly changing after every time you hit a target, you constantly have to adapt your timing and figure out how the ricochet and bullet is going to travel and stuff like that. So it makes it a little bit different, and it makes it so you can't just get used to the shot and do it over and over and over again. And it's no fun. This kind of like switches it up on you. And there's enough different positions for the paddle that I felt like I always had to adapt. I wasn't ever like completely used to where it was going to be and how I had to hit the target. I also like that it gives you the option to test your high score, since you can track number of shots and number of hits. So even though it's really pretty simple, just bouncing stuff off walls and hitting a target, I think it gives you a lot of options for playing it alone or with friends, and does Shooting Gallery type game in a cool new way. And so for relevance, I was laughing to myself the whole time you were describing why you gave your relevance score, Ben, because that is the exact same reasoning that I have for my relevance score. I gave it an 8 out of 10 for this one. I don't really think Shooting Gallery itself is relevant, other than the way that it kind of innovates on a Shooting Gallery type game a little bit. But just the cartridge system, the Channel F console itself, and all those are super relevant. So I bumped it up to an 8, even though the game itself might not be the most relevant part of it. So overall, I ended up giving it a 3 out of 10. It's maybe not my favorite out of all the Channel F games, but it's still a really cool one that is distinctly different. It's not a Pong clone. It's simple, it's fun, it has no frills, but it's impressive for something on a console, and also just in this whole roster of games that they have for the Channel F.
Yeah. I think the Shooting Gallery might be my favorite one from this opening set. And like you said, like, it's not like glamorous in any way, but I just find it like really fun. I think it just does the gameplay really well. It's super simple, but it sets up certain shots that you have to bounce it off the wall. And I just feel like such a good shot when I'm hitting it and ricochets off 2 walls and then hits the target. I'm like, oh yeah, it's like trick shot,
right,
time.
Right. Yeah, I do like that it's not just like simple positions or simple shots that it puts you in. It's, and I played it for like 10, 15 minutes, maybe even 30 minutes, and I felt like I still wasn't used to all the different places that the angles and positions that it could go to. So it really does keep it simple, but give you enough stuff to keep it interesting.
Yeah. So part of me feels like maybe it was random, because I had the exact same thought. I was like, I've never seen the same position twice, but maybe there was just a lot of positions. I don't know, but I really like that one for some reason. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's a unique game on consoles. Like, I don't think we've seen any game that was a Shooting Gallery in this way.
No, because
not with the different positions.
Yeah, the only real reference I could think of is like the Odyssey Shooting Gallery, which is obviously totally different because that's a light gun game,
right?
Or like in the way that this is sort of Pong-ish because you're hitting a ball towards something, but this is like totally unique for consoles.
Right. Maybe like the Odyssey like submarine game where somebody is shooting and the other person's like trying to dodge a shot essentially, but this one you're just kind of trying to hit the AI. But
right.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was pretty cool. Any kind of shooting games, like I've said this a million times, but I'm a pretty big fan. So
yeah.
yeah, I like that one. Let's move on. The next one is just an honorable mention, but it was also on video cart number 1. It's called Doodle, and basically you use a square that you can control on your 8-directional pad, and you just draw with it. It's basically like Microsoft Paint, but on a console, which again, a very unique concept, very like off the wall, reminds me a lot of the Odyssey. And I think you could pick you could pick between the colors green, blue, and red, which I think is like fairly robust. I was watching a couple of videos and people are making like actually decent artwork with those 3 colors.
That's pretty sweet. Do you know, could you display multiple colors on the screen at the same time?
Yeah. So yeah, you could do a little bit of green, a little bit of blue, a little bit of red. Just have 2. Yeah, you could mix and match. It kind of reminded me of like Etch and Sketch, because your your square that you were drawing with, you can move 8-directional, but I wouldn't recommend it. Most of what I would watch people do was more kind of an Etch and Sketch style of it.
Right, just like a vertical and horizontal.
Right, just because I think it's easier to control that way. But yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting, honestly.
Yeah, it sounds
not
cool.
like a game though.
No, we wouldn't have had a lot of fun reviewing that one.
No.
And for the last one on the video cart 1, we have maybe a little less innovative, but still pretty interesting, Quadradoodle, which is the same as Doodle, but the cursor that you're using to draw is mirrored both vertically and horizontally, so you're kind of drawing like in kaleidoscope almost.
Right, which I don't know. I think drawing actual art in that form would be much more difficult.
Right.
But if you want to draw like weird kaleidoscope shapes, it's perfect, and it's still 3 colors, so it could be cool. It's kind of weird because it's like could be 3 different colors, and then it's also like having 4 different paintbrushes on the screen. So I feel like it's actually probably more technical than you would think.
Yeah. Even the fact that it's able to like mirror it and have one person direct that, I'm sure there's some way to program that in there, but it still seems pretty complex.
I'm just thinking about this now. Like, you could play what's that game where you draw stuff out?
Charades.
Yeah, no. You could play charades on this.
Pictionary, whatever. It's something like that.
Yeah, Pictionary. Like, I feel like it's like perfect for that. So I think there's a lot of extracurricular things you could do with some of these games. Yeah. And by the way, the last 4 games, Tic-Tac-Toe, Shooting Gallery, Doodle, and Quadradoodle, were all on the same cartridge. Like, that's never happened before, I don't think. Many different, and they're like different games. I mean, Tic-Tac-Toe has like AI, Shooting Gallery, you're like shooting stuff, and then you get these drawing games. I feel like that's pretty impressive.
It is, yeah, all for 1 cartridge. Yeah.
And I don't know how much either the console or the carts cost, but whatever it was, like, this is a pretty good deal, I think. But let's move on to the second video cart. This was also available at release, and it featured 2 games. One was Shooting Gallery, which we've already covered. This was basically, if you didn't get the first video cart, it allowed you to play Shooting Gallery on the second video cart. So, I don't know if that's good or bad, but I would probably rather have a different game on there. But it's probably good for consumers that can play Shooting Gallery, which I think is one of the better ones. So that's on video cart 2, and then it has a unique game called Desert Fox. So that's the one that I covered and rated. This one is basically like the people at the Fairchild company were like, that tank game that Key Games made? What if we put that on a console? Like, big brain ideas,
Right.
And I think in concept, it sounds great, but there's still like a massive difference between what consoles can do and what arcade machines can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, it kind of falls short in a lot of ways. So let's just get into it. For gameplay, I gave it a 2 out of 10. Here's like the big thing about the gameplay. You know how in the first tank game, like in the very original one, there was no respawning. So if someone got hit, they just stood there, right? And there would be like a little explosion sprite or something that would flash up, but you could just like continually like blast somebody over and over and over again if they didn't move, you know?
Right, yeah.
This is the same thing. So, and because like you can hit them, they can also hit you. So if you're like just firing at somebody and hitting them, you're probably also getting hit. So I just feel like without a respawning system, it feels really weird to play. Like there's no consequences of just going up and like
meet in the middle, and it's basically just like a slugfest until you run out of time or whatever. And
right. It feels like what would happen if two people in Call of Duty like had invulnerable lives? They just run up right beside each other to shoot each other in the face. Like I'm like, I don't know if there's really gameplay there, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of weird in that respect. I will say, like, it is a, kind of tank game, and I love tank. I mean, I think you love tank. Everybody loves tank. So I think the idea is good, but the first tank game had its flaws, and we brought it up then, but it kind of masked that because of all the other features it had, and because of how early it was in the timeline. But, like, this is, like, 3 years later? Like, it can't be worse than the first one again. So, yeah, I just feel like they should have looked at the more recent tank games and try to take more from that instead of the first one, which had flaws, like that. So, I don't know. As far as, like, actual gameplay movement went, you had 8-way movement, which was pretty cool, I guess. You could also rotate the tank, so you could fire 45 and 90 degree in all the directions. So like it was basically northwest, east, south, and then the northwest, southeast, that that kind of diagonal as well.
Right.
But again, it felt really weird because you're allowed to fire, like there's only allowed to be one bullet on the screen per player at any time, but as soon as the bullet left, you could fire again. So if you just were mashing it, like it's hard to find a place where you could hit somebody and wouldn't immediately get hit. I think if you were like on opposite sides of the screen, maybe you could do some dodging, but you're most likely going to be moving towards each other. I think like that's just what most people would do. So I feel like the gameplay was kind of flawed a little bit. You also, by the way, I'll get into this a little bit with graphics, but the map didn't take up the whole screen, just like hockey didn't take up the whole screen. I don't know if Shooting Gallery did. But
there might have been. I mean, there was definitely a black area for the timer and
score. For the score, yeah. But this one, it was basically like borders around all the edges, except for the score again. So, and hockey was like that. So it didn't use the full screen, and the map itself was very simple, especially compared to Tank, which we know pretty well at this point. The original one had a bunch of these walls that you could hide around, and it was kind of almost maze-like. It had a bunch of mines. This one, it had like, I want to say maybe like 5 mines in the middle that were pretty easily avoidable. And then 4 very small like corner walls around the corners. But for the most part, it was pretty empty. And the tanks themselves are massive sprites, it feels like. So you really feel pretty claustrophobic on the map. That didn't help the gameplay either. But let's get into graphics. I gave graphics a 2 out of 10. You do have color graphics, which I very much appreciate. And you do have like a little sprite that pops up when you get hit, which is cool. But the tanks like don't look good. They don't look good at all.
Right.
These might be some of the worst tank sprites I've seen, like ever. They're definitely worse than the arcade one, which again came out like 3-4 years ago. So I'm like expecting them to look somewhat like Tank, especially if that's like definitely the direct influence, So it wasn't good. And I will say you do have basically slightly different sprites depending on which way your tank is rotated. So you always know where you are in rotation, which is great. But they just don't look good. They don't look like tanks. It's weird. The diagonal sprites are definitely bigger and longer than the vertical ones.
Oh, yeah, like sort of that weird perspective kind of issue.
Yeah, so I don't know. I didn't like it. When the tanks move, they kind of like... It doesn't look quite right either. It's kind of like... it's a good example. Like, if you can imagine, like, army men moving, like, their legs are, like, glued together, right? So they kind of have to, like, stomp around. It doesn't. It's something about it like doesn't look quite right, especially if you're being angled like to the east, let's say, and you're going north. Like it just looks like the tank is like hopping north. But because there's no tracks or anything, I don't know. The movement didn't quite look right, so I have quite a bit of things that I don't quite like about how it looks. Again, I think the map's pretty plain. The tanks don't look like tanks. I mean, the pool I guess looks fine. The explosion I guess looks okay, but I don't know. It is color graphics for a console, so I have to be somewhat okay with it, but I just gave it 2 out of 10. I think if the tanks would have looked better, it just seemed like the resolution was really, really bad, and that could be part of the console. I don't know, but everything was like proportioned really weirdly,
Right. Yeah.
In a way where it felt like the tanks were massive and would get hit all the time, and it felt like the space you were playing in was very small and pretty like bland. So I don't know, it didn't feel very good to look at. For sound, I gave 2 out of 10, so the best sound here for the games I rated anyway, and that's because it had some original sound, I guess, that came with the video cart. You had Pong sounds that would play if you hit somebody, and I think maybe if you shot too, I forget. But you had this tank movement sound that was definitely a unique sound that was not a Pong sound. It doesn't sound good, but it is unique and different from any other game on the console that I've seen so far. So, had to respect it somewhat. Anytime there's a new sound on a console, I'm like, that's pretty cool. And I don't know if this like came with the cartridge. I don't know how it was made, but I thought it was pretty cool that it's different from the Pong sounds of all the other games.
Right.
And finally, for relevance, I did not include the console on this one.
Oh yeah, tear it down.
I gave it I didn't do it too bad. I gave 4 out of 10 for relevance, just because I think it's continuing the tradition of tank games on a console. And to be fair, I think it's the best tank game on a console. It's just not a good one. So I had to give it some points for trying. I think the idea is there and the potential is there, but it just seems like, I mean, how many games were released with this console at release? It's 9 games were released at the same time. Like, it just needed more time. It needed like maybe the full video cart space to take advantage of, but being on the same cart as Shooting Gallery, which is, again, it's not the most complicated game, but I'm sure it took up some amount of room on the cartridge. I just need a little bit more time, a little bit more polish, I think. So, but I respect what they did, and to be fair, if you're buying Video Cart 2, you're really buying it for Desert Fox. They pushed it hard, and it, especially with the unique sound and a couple of the unique things it did, I think it's worth at least a 4 out of 10. So, in total, I give it a 2.5 out of 10. It's a somewhat solid tank game on a console, but I just had to feel like I'd much rather play it in an arcade.
Right.
And you're going to have such a much better time in an arcade. But, it feels like this weird like knockoff that I know consoles aren't there yet, but it's such a degradation of everything that it's just too much. It's a little bit too bad.
Right. Yeah, I feel like it's got that same graphical. I mean, in Gunfight, it wasn't really an issue so much as it made us like it more. But the same thing, where like those cowboys are gigantic, because to be able to add detail on something that doesn't have that much room for detail, where like I don't know if pixels is the right term, but it seemed like the pixels for the Fairchild console were like gigantic.
Right.
So
yeah.
I'm sure the tanks were huge, just because they're like, to make this look anything slightly like a tank, we have to make it gigantic.
Yeah, I don't know. It was weird because I felt like, they did make it gigantic, but it didn't look any better. It was just kind of like a very pixelated big tank,
Right, yeah.
So I just feel like it wasn't ready yet, and that might be like this console just can't do it and it will never be able to do it. But I've seen like some of the later Fairchild Channel F games, and I do think I don't think it's a console technology thing. I think it's, they had to push out 9 games here over the course of 4 carts, all in time for one release. And I just think it needed more time and a little bit more technology put into Desert Fox in order to make it the tank game that it was supposed to be. So it's, again, all of these games are very unique. We've not seen them on consoles at all, so I still appreciate it for what it is, and think it's, if I was a person in November of 76 and I picked up Desert Fox, I don't think I'd be disappointed, because I'd have something nobody else had in their house, essentially. A game that only exists on this console. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. And I didn't have to pay like $3,500 for an arcade machine, so...
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's a big factor too.
Yeah. So why don't we move into the last video cart, Wes? And this one you did, and it's only one game on the whole cart, so it better be good.
We'll see about that. But yeah, so this is the Video Cart 3, and the only game on this is Video Blackjack, which I think you can imagine what it is. So I just want to... It's a tank game. No, I'm kidding.
No.
I just want to briefly mention the gameplay, but basically it's just normal blackjack. It's either 1 or 2 player blackjack. You're playing against both each other and the dealer as typical blackjack style, so there is an AI for the dealer. You start with 500 points or monies to bet, and you can increase the bet up to 99. Again, I think because it can only display up to 2 digits at the bottom. And other than that, it's just traditional blackjack. The house will hit if they have a 16, but they'll stay on a 17. So you really want to get those 17s or 18s. You're pretty safe around there. And there also is a feature in this where you can double down on a hit, so that if you win on that hit, you get double your bet back. So just some nice added stuff, so it's not just like bare bones blackjack in this one. And thinking about it now, as I go through my ratings for this, it's pretty good. But it is the only game on this game cartridge. So there may be another discussion to be had about the value of this video cart. But let me get right into what I thought about this game in particular. So for graphics, I actually gave it a 2.5 out of 10. Everything on the screen is simple, and there aren't any designs on the cards, which kind of sucked. There's no like indicator for like an ace or like the king or queen or anything like that, or even like spades, diamonds, hearts, none of that stuff. But it is all very easy to read, which I think is important. There's basically, to cover the whole screen, there's a total at the top for each player, a bet amount, and the cards are also very easily read because since there's nothing on them, it's basically just completely white with a number or letter right in the middle of it. The whole screen itself is pretty much colored green in a semicircle, which is nice because it actually makes it look like a poker table with like the green felt and the fact that they try to make a circle out of it.
Right.
And the outside of the semicircle is just white, and then there's a black top where the score is displayed. The main text at the bottom is blue, and all of the numbers on the cards are red, so they're using a couple different colors, really putting a bunch of different stuff on screen. So despite how simple it is, I think it does a pretty good job of emulating like the feel of a poker table in a blackjack game. And I definitely think it does a better job of like making you feel like you're playing blackjack than even something like Hit Me by Ramtech, which was an arcade machine, but it was just kind of black and white on a blank screen.
I was just thinking, like, because if Desert Fox is their take on Tank, I had to imagine this is their take on Hit Me. And I was wondering, is it actually better than Hit Me or equivalent to the arcade, counterpart? Which, if it is even close, I'd say that's a huge win for them.
Yeah, and I would say it definitely is close, and in some aspects better. I forget specifically the sounds and stuff like that for Hit Me. That may have been better since it was on an arcade cabinet, but possibly because this is, a fairly simple type of game, and even just the small addition of the fact that they made it green and it had color, and they had put a green semicircle on there. Like, it's such a small thing, but it makes it feel like the cards are on a table, not just floating in space.
Which the last game was black and white, right? Hit Me?
It was just black and white, and it was kind of just like text all over the screen, but no like indications of a table. They did do a nice thing where like your cards are like layering on top of each other like this game does as well, but that was basically it.
And that came out like
I want to say it was 75,
ago.
Yeah, or
no,
yeah,
it's
76.
76.
And yeah. So when you think about it from that perspective, it is really a big jump for thinking this is a console and just 6 months later, and they're doing this well.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Other than that, graphically, the only big thing I noticed is that if you get 21, like you're dealt 21, or you hit and you get 21, a random card shows up on the screen that just kind of does like a bunch of flickering symbols that are different colors to kind of be like, yay, you got 21. So it's just like an interesting, weird little thing that they did, but I think it's pretty cool and a nice addition. For sound, I gave it a 2 out of 10. There's pretty much 3 different sounds in this one. There's a noise when the cards are dealt, which is basically just a typical Pong bounce. And then there's a noise for both gaining and losing money, depending on whether you win or lose a hand. So those are pretty much just the same sound, but different pitches. I think it's a higher pitch if you win money and a slightly lower pitch if you lose money. And basically it's just a Pong sound played back to back really quickly for each point or, like dollar that you gained or lost. So it's not anything super exciting, but I do like that it kind of gives you the feel of like pulling a slot machine and like winning a bunch of money. Because if you win like 100 on a bet, it'll just keep dinging. I don't know if it does it exactly 100 times, but it goes a lot.
Right.
And I thought it was pretty good. All the people in the videos that I watched play this said it was incredibly annoying. So maybe when you're playing it in person, it's not that great. But I did think it's at least a neat idea and a good way of using that Pong sound to do something different that kind of feels like real casino gambling sort of feeling.
Mm-hmm.
For the gameplay, I gave it a 2.5 out of 10. It's pretty much just Blackjack, but it's a faithful version of Blackjack that I think gives you like all the options you would normally have in real Blackjack. It looks like it controls pretty simply, and I think that it's a good game for something that can display color, but it might not really have the best quality sprites. Like, I'm glad that they put all this color in it, but they could have done a little bit more with the card. But this kind of works well for that kind of game, because even if you don't have super detailed cards, as long as you get the feeling of Blackjack right, the gameplay's still fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I also just think the fact that you can now play video Blackjack at home with friends is pretty cool. I mean, we haven't had anything like that as far as I know. And this is also a good feeling Blackjack. Like, it's easy to play and it makes sense. So you could just pull it up if you had a console and play it at any time.
Yeah, and I feel like people would actually do that for like parties or something, rather than have a deck of cards on the coffee table. You just have like this open in a party, like two people sit down and play, I think.
Yeah. I think, I mean, especially for the novelty of it, if not for the, like some people, I'm sure still today, some people still prefer the physical cards, and there's nothing you can do in this that you can't do with physical cards, other than maybe the fact that it digitally keeps track of your score. So that's a little bit easier.
And like the computer is taking the place as the dealer, which I imagine if you're at a party or something, the dealer is probably not the most like fun position to play. I actually don't know. Do you play just against each other?
Usually when I play it, I just play against other people, and nobody's really the dealer or playing the role of like that the dealer plays in traditional Blackjack. Mm-hmm. But either way, say you only had 2 people and you felt like playing Blackjack, it kind of works better to be able to have a dealer that's automated and adds an extra element to it.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's just really cool that this was available at home for a video Blackjack kind of thing. For relevance, I still lump this in with the Channel F for my relevance and gave it a 7 out of 10. I think video Blackjack definitely has some inherent relevance in itself. I do lend a lot of the relevance in this score to the fact that it's on this Channel F console. And one of the things is that we were just talking about is I don't know if it has the sway to pull you away from playing with real cards, but it might have at that time because it was so new and interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of the relevance in this is just that you're able to play Blackjack at home on your TV, which is pretty sweet. So for my overall rating, I gave it a 3 out of 10. It's really just simple Blackjack, but I think that's kind of the best thing about this game. Like, it just does it right. It's not anything crazy, but it feels like normal blackjack, and it doesn't do anything like totally out there that you're like, oh, I can't do this with video blackjack, but I could do this with real cards. Like most everything you could do with real cards, you can do in this. So I wish the graphics were better, but considering like the system it was on and the fact that it's on a home console, I think they did a really good job with it.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, especially compared to Hit Me, I'm like, that actually I think is better, maybe.
I think
Other
it is
than
too.
maybe sound, but
right. Yeah. And there was like a lot of details on how to play the game in Hit Me that were just kind of like on the screen, but especially if you already know how to play blackjack, this is a lot better, I think.
Yeah, so of the video cards, Wes, which one would you pick up?
I mean, I don't want to go just because it has the most, but I feel like you definitely get the most bang for your buck from that video cart one.
I think so too.
I mean,
I think shooting galleries
drawing,
are honestly like a pretty big sell for me.
Yeah. And even just like the drawing, it's not this super in-depth game, but it would be kind of fun. Just mess around, draw stuff on your screen.
Yeah.
Super cool.
It's interesting to me to see, like, even though you have 4 games on the first one, I do think that they're more simple games than something like Video Blackjack. So it's interesting to me, and Desert Fox is like right in the middle where it has 2 games, and they're more complicated than like Doodle, I think, but not as complicated as Video Blackjack, which I guess had to take up the full amount of the cartridge. And to be fair, I think it's a pretty technical game. It's in full color and it's playing blackjack pretty well, so it's very interesting to see how technology is used in the first couple Fairchild Channel F games here.
Right, yeah, and just the different amounts of space and the ability to put all these different types of games on these cartridges, like you were mentioning. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and by the way, I think this is the biggest launch lineup of any console since the Odyssey. I mean, you had like Pong 10, which I guess technically had 10 games, but not really.
Right, yeah.
This is definitely the most unique lineup that we've seen since the original Odyssey, and a lot of these games are super unique and super, like, Doodle is unlike anything that we've ever played on a console.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's pretty cool. It totally reminds me of the Odyssey, like, so much, like when we first started the Odyssey and how wonky all the weird stuff that they had on it. Right. And this one, I feel like we're getting some of that wonky stuff again, like Quadradoodle. It's like, why would you put that? But I actually kind of love it.
Yeah, it's that same sort of feeling where like we review the games and we're like, okay, these games like aren't that great all the time, but they're doing a lot of cool stuff and a lot of interesting stuff. So even if the gameplay itself is like, meh, it's pretty good, it's still really cool and has like its own niche. It's just like this interesting, quirky console that kind of came out of nowhere and started a new generation.
Yeah. I mean, even Desert Fox, which I feel like kind of let me down a little bit, like it still is completely different compared to anything else you can play at home, So they're still like innovating in so many different ways here. Like this launch lineup has so many innovations in it. It's ridiculous. But I think that'll do it for us today. This is the only Fairchild episode that we're going to have in 76, because this is all the games that were released in 76, the ones available at release in November. And then in 77, which is coming up pretty soon here, they're going to have, I don't know how many more, but quite a bit more that we'll cover in either a little bit in a bunch of episodes, or maybe we'll do another big episode for Fairchild again. But yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. We talked about what's the difference between the first and second generation of consoles. We mentioned some weird Bailey games that might not exist, and then, of course, the Fairchild Channel F, probably the most important console that we've covered to date. So yeah,
a lot of good stuff. As always, make sure to check out our website. Check us out on Twitter, send us a tweet, or send us an email if you have any questions and you just want to let us know what you think of the podcast. We're always happy to hear from people.
Yeah, by the way, I have a new YouTube video coming out of me playing stuff. It should be out by the time this is out. So if I can remember, I'll try to link that below. But yeah, just go check it out. So I think with that, we'll call it done for today. Wes, you've been amazing. Your voice sounds amazing.
Oh, thank you very much.
And we'll see you guys next time.
See you guys in the next one.